Back here on RWA Hype, Rob Massey alongside Jonathan James Fear.
Thought the referee was supposed to be Mike Santana.
You're really going to do that?
He has a job to do.
Well, the Gears of War hailing from Newport, Rhode Island, where the Navy base is. But they don't look like they're seamen. That's your favorite part, isn't it, JJ? The crank.
Oh, I love it. Pandering to the fans. Oh, I can't take the sheer emotion in this room where everybody is just eating it up. Oh, everybody crank it up for Frank the Crank, because that does something in the match. That means something. That's supposed to be important.
Ronnie Ribs and Frank the Crank have been childhood friends. They're teaming now. You know, Frank came to the aid of Ronnie Ribs when he faced the Irish Warrior a while back. You know, they're trying to get the crowd on their side. Look what it helped Santana.
Who cares about the crowd? What does the crowd have to do with anything? These two men, the Irish Warrior and Nick Marchand, care nothing about the crowd's reaction to them. All they care about is winning matches. And that's why they're successful.
Well, not being flanked by Miss Lynn tonight, we're not sure where she is, but I'm sure she's raising her own sort of personal hell. The Irish Warrior and the carrier of the case, and a huge fan of what's going on this weekend, Nick Marchand from...
See, look at the intensity in his eyes. Look at the intensity as he got in those eyes. He stares directly at you.
I don't want to.
That's a man. That's a man on a mission. That's a man to respect. Not some little gimmick where you're cranking an imaginary crank. What does this do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Intensity, aggression, and not pandering to the fans. That's what gets you moving in this business.
And if you don't like that, you can just knock out your boss.
If you have to.
The Irish Warrior stands at 275, just about 6'6". Nick Marchand, just over 200 pounds, extremely talented in his own right. Frank the Crank had his first win last week against Nick Marchand. And there's the bell, our first match in the RWA Tag Team Tournament. And now the Irish Warrior is asking for Ronnie Ribs.
He's wanted Ronnie Ribs for a while. He got him in a match, and he's clearly not finished with him. The business between Ronnie Ribs and the Irish Warrior is clearly not settled.
Well, and there's the issue that could cost them in this match, being distracted by things like this. And there's a tag. Ronnie Ribs will face the Irish Warrior. Now the Irish Warrior tags out, and he tags in Nick Marchand. Mind games being played here.
Smart strategy. Getting in the head of Ronnie Ribs, getting in the head of Frank the Crank. Not a bad idea.
Ronnie Ribs is mocking the Irish Warrior. Warrior saying on the outside he has nothing to prove. So here we go. Let's try to start this match again. Ronnie Ribs will square up with Nick Marchand, who's taking his sweet time, checking his Bieberish hair, and calling a timeout.
That's a little odd for Nick Marchand here. Usually he's oozing with confidence. Usually he comes in with a plan, a strategy, set to go, and the back off from Ronnie. I don't think he was ready to start off the match with him.
Collar elbow tie up, and Ronnie Ribs just tosses. What a hip toss! And Nick Marchand tags out. Warrior looks angry. He charges. Drop toe hold by Ronnie Ribs. Now an elbow right to the point of the spine. As I said to start this match, it looks like the Irish Warrior is more distracted than Ronnie Ribs and Frank the Crank. Frank the Crank now kicks the Irish Warrior. These two behemoths have locked up in the past. In fact, Frank had the business given to him by the Irish Warrior a couple of months ago. Ronnie Ribs tags back in. Double axe handle. And torquing that arm and shoulder again, the injured shoulder of the Irish Warrior. Marchand is saying that Ronnie Ribs is pulling the Irish Warrior's hair. Irish Rib, double back elbow, drops the Irish Warrior.
I have to give Gears of War credit. The quick tags, keeping you fresh, keeping your opponent in the ring, keeping one of your opponents set apart in the ring. It's a smart strategy. I just don't know how well it's going to work on the Irish Warrior. Yeah, he's on the ropes right now, but he's never down for long.
Irish Warrior in a bad way goes for an Irish Rip. Frank the Crank has reversed and gets kicked right in the back by Nick Marchand, and now a knee right to the gut by the Irish Warrior. Santana would have saw that.
He's not seeing much right now.
Irish Warrior working on that leg and knee of Frank the Crank. Putting a lot of torque into that left leg of Frank the Crank. Now here's a cover. 1, 2, and Frank kicks out. Ronnie Ribs in late to try to break up the pinfall. Going into the turnbuckle now. Frank the Crank is being hung up by Nick Marchand as Steve Mosher is arguing with Ronnie Ribs and the Irish Warrior. Now the Irish Warrior and Nick Marchand giving the business to Frank the Crank as Ronnie Ribs has Steve Mosher distracted.
And now Nick Marchand in with the tag here. And again, Ronnie Ribs keeps trying to get involved in this matchup. And
what?
I don't understand what he doesn't get about the rules. It's one person in the ring at a time. One person in the ring at a time.
I'm so glad you're paying attention.
I'm paying attention. Clearly Ronnie Ribs isn't.
And you have no problem with the Irish Warrior, Nick Marchand, choking out Frank the Crank.
I have no idea what you're talking about. All I can see is Ronnie Ribs continuously trying to get in the ring.
Marchand with a forearm right to the face of Frank the Crank. Another forearm, a third to the big Sequoia.
These two have gone at it time and time again, and Nick Marchand, for the most part, gets the better of Frank the Crank because of the inexperience.
Irish whip into the corner. Frank with a knee to the gut, going for a vertical suplex. Gets him over, and Marchand now in a bad way. Here's a cover. The Irish Warrior breaks it up. Not even a 1 count. Ronnie Ribs goes after the Irish Warrior, being stopped by Steve Mosher.
Again, he's in the ring. This is ridiculous. After a while, the referee's just going to have to disqualify them.
You would think that.
It doesn't make sense. What is he doing in the ring?
There's a big scoop and a slam to Nick Marchand. Off the ropes. One more 1980s leg drop and a kick right to the back by Nick Marchand. No water in the pool for Frank the Crank.
Wow, they fixed the roof.
Ha! Let's see what you did there. That was funny. You have jokes.
Don't laugh at anything I say, ever. Ever.
Meanwhile, back to things that matter, Frank the Crank is in a lot of trouble. Being hammered by Nick Marchand, now being tagged in. The Irish Warrior is going to fire in at Frank the Crank. Frank the Crank just being manhandled by the Irish Warrior. And you can just imagine how mean Warrior would be if Miss Lynn were here tonight. Now just gouging the eyes against the rope and mocking Ronnie Ribs. The Irish Warrior now distracts Steve Mosher, pointing to Ronnie Ribs, and here's the double team again.
Because Ronnie Ribs keeps getting in the ring.
Ronnie Ribs has had enough, and he's going after Nick Marchand.
Look at this. What is he doing in the ring?
Steve
He doesn't
Mosher
belong in there.
is trying to muscle Ronnie Ribs out of the ring. And now that was a low shot on Frank the Crank.
I have to give Steve Mosher credit on this one. He's definitely keeping Ronnie
Cover,
Ribs.
1, 2, and a kick out.
He's definitely keeping Ronnie Ribs from trying to break the rules intentionally.
Intentionally breaking the rules. Are you kidding me?
And interfere in the match. See,
and now, if Ronnie Ribs knocked down.
If he wanted in the ring, he should have just tagged Frank the Crank. What's he doing on the floor?
Irish Warrior just drilling his leg into the back of the neck. Frank the Crank has a cover. No, it's a tag. You probably rooted against Ralph Macchio, didn't you?
It's not the Karate Kid.
And now the Irish Warrior staring at me. Great. This crowd chanting "Crank it up," trying to get Frank the Crank back to his feet. Crank goes for a kick. Marchand ducks it and just a knee right to the face. Marchand taking time to admire himself, and a drop kick by Frank the Crank! Haven't seen that before by Frank the Crank. Now Frank trying to get to his corner. Ronnie Ribs has been like a caged animal wanting to get into this match.
Oh, Nick Marchand needs to get into his corner so that they can keep Frank the Crank
Ronnie
away from
Ribs is trying to get Frank the Crank fired up and into his corner.
And Marchand better make that tag because Irish Warrior is not a man that you want to upset.
And there's the tag to the Irish Warrior. Frank the Crank makes a tag to Ronnie Ribs. And here comes Ronnie Ribs with a big clothesline. But the Irish Warrior stays up. Another clothesline. Warrior still on his feet. Off the ropes going for a clothesline. Warrior ducks and catches Ronnie Ribs. And a spine buster. Look at the strength of the Warrior. And now he's going hammering Frank the Crank. Nick Marchand looks like on the other side of the ring. He's trying to get in. Irish Warrior is holding Steve Mosher and a big kick to the face of Ronnie Ribs.
I think the Irish Warrior is just making sure that Steve Mosher doesn't fall.
Hey, wait a minute. We have a cover. And 2, and no way. The Irish Warrior and Nick Marchand win this match. As Marchand helped Frank the Crank down outside the ring. He was the one that got the kill shot on Ronnie Ribs. And that's a damn shame.
Excellent match. Great strategy by Irish Warrior and Marchand. And you know, if Ronnie Ribs wasn't distracting the referee as much as he was, the Gears of War could have possibly pulled out a win. Unfortunately, Ribs cost him the match. It's a shame.
Well,
it's a real shame.
You know, I think you should go for a walk or something. I'm going to bring in a guest in our next match, and I really don't want you around.
If I'm not needed.
You're not needed, but you're here.
If I'm not needed, why bother sitting here?
You didn't have to tell me anything. More RWA hype when we come back.